Good morning. And let me just start by saying, Lizzie, thank you so much. Just last night I was sitting with my family and I owned that I really like country music. There was this shock and horror from my family, and I then said, look, I seriously would love to go to Tamworth. So it was lovely, Lizzie, to see you up here. Thank you. And Lance, I used to live in Lismore, so thank you. Also a big shout out to folks in Lismore. I want to start by saying an enormous thank you for the opportunity of being here. I do a lot of presenting, I don't normally get nervous, and I felt really nervous in the weeks leading up to this time here. Kate, I could really resonate with what you said. It's also to me, because I'll say a little more as we go, but what we're going to talk about today, what I'm going to share, means an enormous amount, and just wanted to acknowledge those nerves as I stand here in front of you. I want to also say that I think your framework for practice is extraordinary, and it's an incredible honour for me to be here and have the opportunity to hear the details of some of the amazing practice that you guys are doing every day and the difference that you've made, and particularly the changes that I'm hearing about over recent years. So yeah, it's an honour to be here. Thank you. I'm going to spend about 45 minutes talking about something dear to my heart, which is the integration of really partnership-based practice and the structured decision-making tools. Maybe for some people not the most exciting topic that we could be talking and thinking about, but it's something that I think is incredibly important. Before we go into that, I just want to make some important acknowledgements. The first is, let me just move us one forward. Yes, it's working. As you heard, I'm from Western Australia. I was born in Wangutha country, the goldfield regions of WA. I grew up in Nulluma country, which is up in the far north, the Pilbara region of WA. That's where I grew up and worked, and is the country that's my home. And I now live in Whadjuk Noongar country in Perth in Western Australia. And I want to acknowledge that we meet today on the land of the Camaragal people in the Eora Nation. Always has, always will be Aboriginal land, and it's an honour and privilege for me to be here with you. I also want to shout out to Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander colleagues here in the room, and to all of you as practitioners, just to say I think that the work you do every day is the most important work. For me, it's the work I've dedicated my adult lifetime to. As I share some of the learning today, I really want to share it in the spirit of saying, here's some of what I've learnt, here's some of what I hope may be helpful in your own ongoing journey, but I really want to offer it with an open hand that really kind of rests on enormous respect for the work that you guys do every day. Another really important acknowledgement I want to make is that the overrepresentation of Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander children in out-of-home care, in fact at all points of the child protection continuum, is a national tragedy. For me, I feel enormously blessed to have been born in this country, to grow up in a land which has such a rich culture and heritage and such a strong spiritual connection to land that we all benefit from every day. And so for me, when I think about, talk about, am involved in trying to be part of solution building to the enormous overrepresentation, I've heard many people talk about it as a wicked problem, and I think it's a problem that needs all of us to be part of the solution. So I just want to name that up as we begin this time together. But I also want to just name up, for those who haven't seen, it was fantastic to hear about the Family as Culture report this morning, and I'll be reading that just as soon as I can. I also want to name up the Family Matters campaign and the recent 2019 Family Matters report. If you haven't seen that, please take a read. The research and the recommendations are critically important to the work that we all do. One further set of acknowledgements before we dive into some detail is I really want to acknowledge that there are many, many people who I work with and I learn from every day. So I want to acknowledge my team, Catherine Santora, Eleonora Di Michelle, who many of you in the room may know. We work closely together all over the world. It's an enormous privilege to work with them, as it is with my close colleagues at the Children's Research Centre. People may know Phil Decter, Dr. Raylene Freitag from that photograph. I have the enormous privilege of working closely with the Children's Research Centre. And then the rest of the people, I won't name them up individually, but I just want to name up that, as I said, not only do I have the privilege of working with amazing practitioners around the world, but also learning with and from people, including from children and families who I learn from every day. So, just very briefly, I'm not going to talk about the Partnering for Safety approach in any kind of detail, but for those people who are not aware of the approach that I teach, I want to just name up that the Partnering for Safety approach is something that I teach around the world in lots of different countries, in Australia, in New Zealand, in parts of the United States, in parts of Europe, in Singapore, in Taiwan, in Japan. I have this blessed job where I get to travel way too much, actually. I'd really love to stay home if there weren't so many amazing places to learn from. But I have the privilege of working in lots of places, and what that means is I get to learn from practitioners about the best of practice, and also sometimes from the worst of what we as human beings can do to each other. And I have the enormous privilege of bringing learning from different places back to other places where I work. The Partnering for Safety approach is family-centred, safety-focused, strength-based, solution-focused approach to practice. It has as its very core about partnering with families, with families' extended networks, with other professionals who we work with. Both has key principles and also a whole range of practical tools and processes. The other thing about the Partnering for Safety approach is that we made a really conscious decision a number of years ago, or I made a really conscious decision to try and integrate that practice with the structured decision-making tools. So I've gone a real journey. Kate, you talked about stories. So the story that I want to start by sharing is I've gone an incredible journey over the last 10 years with structured decision-making. And back in 2006, probably between 2006 and 2009, I was hearing about structured decision-making. I was working in Western Australia as a practitioner. I was beginning to do consultancy work around the world, and I heard about structured decision-making, and at that time what I was hearing was not particularly positive. I then began working in the US in a number of different counties, in Colorado, in California, in Minnesota, and the counties I was working with, I'd been asked to come and work with them around helping them to deepen and grow their partnership-based practice. And those counties were all using structured decision-making, so I needed to absolutely get my head around those tools and how they could integrate well with practice. The other thing that was happening is I was beginning to, some of my close colleagues, people in the room may know Phil Decter from the Children's Research Centre. At that point, Phil was not with the Children's Research Centre, he was a consultant, and he and I worked closely together, and he went to join the Children's Research Centre. So it was a fantastic opportunity for me to start to learn more about the SDM tools. 2011, I was invited to be here in Sydney as part of one of your Research to Practice seminars, presenting alongside Dr. Raylene Freitag about the integration of practice and SDM. I feel like felt like quite a baby at that point in trying to even think about how could we be integrating structured tools and very much family-centred practice. In 2012, 2013, I was involved here as part of one of your pilots, a short-term court order restoration family preservation pilot. Can I ask, were there people in the room here that were part of that pilot? I've certainly recognised some faces, and Elaine, great to see you and recognising faces. So I was here then for a period of 2 years, coming back and forth, involved in training workers in both practice. At that point we were calling it family safety centred practice, which was a huge mouthful. When we started trying to translate that into other languages, I remember into Japanese and Danish, and my colleague said, seriously? That kind of doesn't translate. So Partnering for Safety was the name that we then chose at that point. So I was involved in the pilot at that point and really having to start grounding how does family-centred practice really integrate with the use of structured tools. Continuing on from then, 2014 to 2018, I was blessed to be one of the members of the team. It was both myself, Kath and Elle, and the Children's Research Centre team who won the tender to work with the Queensland Government and non-government sector to help them develop and implement a framework for practice. So we worked from 2014, actually until this year still, even in Queensland. It was an enormous journey and an enormous learning. I think it was probably one of the times in my career where I learnt the most in those years. Similarly, 2015 to presently, we're working with the Queensland Government and non-government sector, including the children's homes in Queensland, helping them to develop and implement a framework for practice. So they're implementing both Partnering for Safety and SDM, and we're integrating that together. So again, enormous learning. Presently, a number of places I'm working, and Kath and Elle are working. We're doing a little bit of work here in New South Wales and in Taiwan, in South Australia. Again, really trying to focus on how do we support practitioners' systems to grow family-centred practice and at the same time ensure that that integrates with structured decision making. So it's been a huge journey and one I'm enormously thankful for. And I was really pleased that the organising team for these 2 days were happy for me to have this as the area that I spoke about today. So yeah, lots of learning, it's ongoing. I mentioned, as I said, that I have that opportunity to work around the globe, and so I just wanted to name up a couple of things that are real standouts when I think about the kind of context that child protection is resting within around the globe. One is that what I'm seeing and what practitioners who are way more experienced than me are continually seeing and naming up is that our work is increasingly complex and continues to be under-resourced. I don't know of a system in the world that I think is resourced sufficiently to do the important work that we do. The other thing I want to name up is that the more complex our work is, the more we see a slide towards anxiety-driven, kind of fear-based, defensive, coercive practice. That as our systems become more complex, the anxiety that as workers we are often having to hold every day means that that slide into defensive, anxiety-based practice can be quite a kind of an easy journey to take. And I just want to commend you guys on the work that you have done in really trying to cement dignity-driven and respectful practice into your framework, that it so visibly sits so strongly within your framework. The other thing I want to name up that I see everywhere is that our systems, the way that child protection systems are developed, resource structured, make it really difficult for us to slow down in our decision making and to slow down particularly in terms of collaborative practice. So I think that any organisational tools, systems, processes that help us to slow down, to actually put those mechanisms in place are gold and what we need to be holding on to and building on every day. So what I want to offer in the next 30 minutes, is not any magic wand. I don't have any ideas that are going to miraculously make your work transformed and easy. What I do have are some ideas and some learning that I'd like to share about what I've learnt, the key things I've learnt, some of the key things I've learnt about integrating family-centred practice and partnership-based practice and SDM. And as I said, I also want to offer those ideas with a real deep respect for you guys and for what you do every day. So, some of those key learnings. The first is an adage that I am sure you have heard many, many times from your work here with the Children's Research Centre, from your practitioners every day, is that the SDM tools do not make decisions. They are not designed to make decisions. But as I said, with increasing complexity, increasing stress, what we see is people sliding into that place of expecting the tools to make the decisions. So I just want to name up really clearly and directly. The SDM tools don't make decisions. They were never designed that way. They were designed to be decision support tools, to support you in your professional judgment, in your decision making every day. We as practitioners make decisions. The tools are there to offer that support. They're designed to support us to slow down at those critical decision-making points. So looking here at the suite of SDM tools and the critical decisions that they support you in making, the tools are designed to have you slowing down at those decision-making points. They're also about ensuring that they happen, that thinking, that our decision-making thinking happens within mechanisms that are designed to help you slow down. So case consultation, group supervision, family group conferencing, that the more we can bring the logic, the structure, the thinking from the SDM tools into those platforms, the more it helps us to slow down in our thinking and bring the best of evidence-based and logic as well as professional judgment to those critical decisions that need to be made every day. The other thing I want to say is that the more families are involved in our decision-making, the more that families' views are informing both our assessment as well as our planning, the more effective the SDM tools are. I've heard Dr. Raylene, in her incredibly gentle, serene voice, say, bullshit in, bullshit out. You know, if we don't have good information from families, from the people who know and love these children and this family, who are around this family every day, if we don't have good information from them, then the information that we're putting into the tools is not going to be meaningful. Yeah? So the tools on their own are not going to be able to do the work we want them to do. It's about using those tools within a whole structure of good, solid, collaborative decision-making platforms that help the tools then be useful. I kind of want to also just speak for a moment to the importance of family group conferencing. One of the highlights for me of my time working in Queensland was that enormous resourcing was put into supporting the family group conferencing facilitators. One of the things I was very grateful for was that the leadership team in Queensland listened to us when we said, you need to be having your NGO staff in the room alongside child protection practitioners with every training that's done, with every coaching session that's done. And that was the case across the board, and it was also the case with the family group conferencing facilitators. So the NGOs that were involved at that point as recognised entities were in the room with the child protection family FGM conveners. And the journey that I saw them go through over those 3 years in building relationships with each other, co-convening family-led decision-making meetings, developing a model that I think is a standout in the world in terms of the way they do that work. And the way that I saw them using the information and the family's input into that came forward during those meetings and the involvement of the network to ensure that not only were the SDM tools scored well, but the decision-making really rested on those families' views. I'm sure, you know, many people in the room won't need me to be saying that without family participation, change doesn't happen well. We have to be using every single mechanism we can to ensure that families are at the table in every decision that we make. And I think that family conferencing mechanisms are so underused in our work. I just kind of wanted to make a shout out for there. Maybe made all those points, let me jump over. I also want to reiterate what's been named a couple of times already this morning, which is that cultural consultation is vital in all of the work that we do, and including in the use of the structured decision-making tools. So I think that not only does cultural consultation help us to remember to slow down in our thinking, but it specifically helps us to think about what we know or what we think we know, what we don't know or what we might not know, where our cultural biases might be blinding us to things, where we might be inadvertently misusing our power. I think cultural consultation, particularly at those key decision-making points, is vital. And I'm not talking about token consultation. That's about saying, would you please acknowledge or look at the decision that we've made. In many places where I work, there is a real struggle to shift from cultural consultation that's quite tokenistic into cultural consultation that's actually meaningful and has the right people at the table, and also ensures that the right people are not only at the table, but that their voices are being heard. So the second thing I want to talk about, and I just wanted to check out who in the room's seen this slide. Yeah. It's being used all around the world now, particularly for people like me who are into a good road trip at any time it's up for offer. The second area that I want to talk about is the important distinction that the SDM tools, particularly the safety and risk tools, help us make between danger and risk. And there was a real aha moment for me as I really began to understand what the SDM tools offer. That distinction is critical. And what I've learned, particularly over the last 5 to 6 years, is that the planning that we do with families hasn't distinguished well enough between danger and risk. So that's what I just want to sort of talk about for the next little bit of time. So, as you would know, the SDM safety assessment is looking at danger. It's looking at those moments where a child is in imminent danger, meaning imminent, it could happen at any time. The context in which the harm happened has not changed. The danger could happen at any time, and that the harm we're talking about is at the threshold of serious harm. As you would know, the safety assessment has those thresholds that have been developed here in Queensland a number of years ago now, and that those thresholds are about identifying significant harm. So that's what the safety assessment is looking at, whereas the risk assessment is asking the question, is ongoing intervention with this family necessary? Is this a family that needs ongoing support to ensure or to, with our best support, ensure that a child is not harmed in the future. I also just want to name up that you may or may not know that New South Wales is the only place in the world where the safety assessment and the risk assessment has been called SARA. Don't know if you guys are aware of that. It's the only place, and I can remember the Children's Research Centre kind of thinking that sense of, that's a pretty cute kind of acronym, SARA. What I'm hearing, though, as I work here in New South Wales, is I sometimes hear that the purpose of the two tools is being conflated. So I'm hearing practitioners say things like, SARA said it's high risk. Whereas it's incredibly important that those two tools are understood as having very different purposes and are at different points in that early part of our work with families. So I just really want to encourage you guys to do everything you can to help practitioners understand that the safety assessment, the risk assessment, has a very different purpose in terms of the decision making that it's supporting us to make. So really quick review of SARA. Only because as I step forward into that next part in talking about planning, it's important that we've got this as a foundation. So I know that this will be very familiar to everyone in the room, but I just want to name up that when we have identified in working with a family that there is the presence of danger for a child, we are working at that incredibly pointy end of our work, where the child is literally in danger of serious harm at any point. I think it's very easy that it can become words on a page and we can lose sight of the seriousness of that. So I just wanted to pause for a moment and be really clear that that's what we're talking about. We're talking about those circumstances. At that point, your processes support you to do one of two things. They support you to work with the family and give it your best shot, and to support the family and their network to give it their best shot to protect the child from the danger so that the child's able to remain at home. Yep. That's one of the options that we have. The second option is to separate the child from their family at that point and bring the child into care as a way of protecting the child from the danger. Those are our two options. Because what we have identified, what we have assessed, is that the child is in danger at this point. What I want to name up is that the work that we are then doing, what you guys here call safety planning, what we are calling in many places in the world now immediate safety planning, and I deliberately put the word immediate there to help people distinguish the different type of planning. So you'll hear me say immediate, know that what I'm meaning to say is safety planning within your context. It is some of the most complex, difficult, intrusive, time-intensive, resource-intensive work that we do. It is the incredibly, incredibly hard part of our work. I can't state clearly enough and strongly enough how difficult that work is. That the issues that lead to a child being in danger are often enormously complex. So in that context, we're talking about it may be families who are impacted by trauma, which may be intergenerational trauma, may be impacted by poverty, by housing insecurity. They may be struggling with substance use, mental health issues, family violence, a whole range of really, really complex and difficult issues. Is that sounding familiar for people? Yeah? So that's the area that we are trying to work in to support the family in safety planning. And those issues don't get resolved immediately, and they don't get resolved quickly. So when I say safety planning is really difficult work, it's difficult work because there can be the expectation that an immediate safety plan or a safety plan is going to help the family resolve that danger and ensure that the children are safe. And I'm saying to you, it's highly unlikely that that happens quickly. There certainly are circumstances, for example, where it may be about the physical environment of the home, where we can support the family to resolve that pretty quickly. But most of those issues that lead to danger for children take time to resolve. And it takes enormous time. It takes time for families for us to build relationship with families. It takes time for trust to be built. It takes time to help families think through what's going to make a difference and support them in being able to change behaviour, change their circumstances. It takes time for services to be available if we can find the right service for a family. Who's working in rural New South Wales, in regional New South Wales? Yeah, and who struggles with the availability of services for families every day. It takes time for families to be able to resolve danger, even with the best of support. So one of the key things that I want to name up here is that safety planning is not about behaviour change. And it's certainly not about behaviour change that can happen quickly. The language that I've started to use is about it being a temporary change in the care environment around the child. That's what we're doing with safety planning. Our long-term planning, family action planning, case planning, that's about behaviour change. That's about supporting families to make those changes in behaviour, to provide families with a support that's going to be meaningful to them and help them be able to make the changes that they want to make for their kids and family. Safety planning is about wrapping protection around the child. It's about a temporary change in the care environment, a temporary change of who is right there providing protection for that child. So it's not about behaviour change. And I think that if we expect families to be able to resolve danger quickly, not only do we set them up to fail, so develop with the family a safety plan that's actually not achievable within the short or even the medium term, we set families up to fail in that context, but we also risk leaving children in danger. If the plan, for example, is about a parent saying, well, I won't hit the child, or I won't use tonight, or if I use, I'm going to ring someone to come and be with the child. If we're expecting people to be able to change their behaviour in the immediate term without additional support, my worry is that in that context we set families up to fail. And I have seen that time and time again. I have the privilege of doing a lot of phone consultation around the world with really high-risk safety planning cases, and that's what I see over and over again. The other comment that I want to make as I'm talking about that changing the care environment is that that is really difficult work for families to do. As I said, as I named up at the beginning, not only is this incredibly difficult work for us, but I think it's some of the most difficult work that we invite families to partner with us around. That often in that context, families are not only dealing with all of the challenging stuff that they're dealing with day to day, but now they've got child protection knocking on their door, which may have also history for that family, which could be very traumatic history. So the enormous emotion that families can be experiencing at that time, which, as we know about strong emotion, can have us in fight and flight mode, particularly if you've already experienced and being impacted by trauma. It means that these conversations to try and build a safety plan together is enormously difficult. And this is the place where you have to bring every bit of respect, every bit of skill you have, and every bit of support you have in terms of drawing on the wisdom, the experience, the consultation within your team and your leadership to ensure that the work you're doing there, that you are supported to do, because it's enormously difficult. As I mentioned, sorry, I was about to say immediate, I'll just say it as it comes out, and I hope that you'll know I mean your front-end safety planning. So immediate safety planning needs to involve at least one network member. We can't protect children from danger with only the people who are caring for the child in the context that the danger exists. So an immediate safety plan needs to involve in the beginning at least one network member who is able to be a safe person there for the family, a safe person there for the children at that point. Again, that's an easy thing to say. It's a really hard thing to support families to do and to support families in thinking through. The workshop that Zoe and I are leading both after lunch and tomorrow is going to really dive deep into the how-to of this safety planning work. The other thing that I want to say is because we are talking about danger, we are talking about a child being in danger, and the only thing that has us agreeing to not separate the child from their family but allow the child to be at home is the safety plan. That's what we have confidence in, that the family's been able to develop a strong enough immediate safety plan that it protects that child. So you've got to be absolutely clear that that plan's strong enough, that the safe people who the family have agreed to involve, and that the family have the support that they need to be able to ensure that that safety plan works to keep the child safe. So that means frequent monitoring, frequent support. We talk about around the world, and I feel incredibly a little bit sick to the stomach when I have to say over and over again to very, very busy child protection practitioners, when you're doing immediate safety planning, our recommendation, my recommendation in the beginning, is that you are monitoring that every day. When we have a child in danger, we have to be 100% clear that that plan is strong enough to protect that child. If we're not confident that the family have the support to make that plan work for their kids, we risk leaving children in danger. We risk our safety plans just being pieces of paper. Now, there are all sorts of creative ways around the world, because when I say that, you can imagine the response I get in the room. Who's having an internal, is she serious? Anyone want to name that up? That there are all sorts of creative ways that people learn and are putting into place to be monitoring immediate safety plans, working really closely with other professionals, with organisations that are already involved with the family, as quickly as possible, building relationship with family and network members who you can be phoning, who you can be FaceTiming, who you can be Skyping with, using technology as much as possible to be ensuring. And once we're confident, we can start to back that monitoring off. But initially you have to be really confident that that plan is strong enough. Otherwise, as I said, we risk leaving that child in danger. The other thing I want to say is that, of course, safety plans need to be reviewed. The first questions families will often ask is, seriously, how long do I need to do this for? How long are you saying that we have to have auntie staying with us, or mum and the kids have said, well, the best thing for us to do is we're going to go and stay with my sister. How long does this need to happen for? And that answer, of course, is different for every family, but the answer is actually until the danger is resolved, which can be weeks and months. It's typically months. So that transitioning from a safety plan to your family action planning, that's critical work. And a lot of the integration work we've been doing with SDM is about supporting practitioners and systems to put in place really good processes to transition from safety plans that are about a temporary change in the care environment, transitioning through to family action planning, to the planning that supports families to resolve danger through changes in behaviour. Safety planning, I think, is the best practice that we currently have to try and help families stay together, to not be breaking that sense of belonging, to be preserving children at home with their families. I think it's the best practice that we currently have, and I'm really mindful, just as we look back to 20, 30 years ago, when we look at practice from those days and we ask, seriously, what were they thinking? I'm absolutely clear that in 15, 20 years' time, people are going to be looking back at our practice today and asking, seriously, what were they thinking? So I kind of, as I'm saying that I think this is the best practice we've currently got, I am constantly questioning myself, my colleagues, every practitioner I work with about how can we do this better? How can we do this better for families every day? Because as I said, it's enormously complex work, and it's so vital that we get it right, because if we get it right, it means that that family is able to stay together while we support that family to make the long-term changes. That can mean that child protection is no longer involved with their family. So just to put it in summary very quickly, here's what I'm talking about. When I say two different types of planning, what I'm saying is that when we're looking at danger, when we've identified that there is danger present for a child, we're talking about immediate safety planning, which needs to be a temporary change in the care environment. It's not about behaviour change. Yeah? Whereas that the family action planning, case planning, that's much more about that behaviour change. And that transition between the two is critical. So again, we'll talk and look at the transition between the two in the workshop this afternoon and tomorrow. This is a template I just want to very quickly show. Again, we'll be looking at this in the workshop. So the Children's Research Centre very generously allowed me to change their safety planning template. As I was kind of having these aha moments 5 or 6 years ago, saying, hey, we're not clear enough. We are not clear enough about the two different types of planning. We then made some changes to the safety planning template. So this is going to look a little different from what you're doing here with a safety assessment. And there are certainly Southwest region, are you in the room? Yoo-hoo! I know that you guys are absolutely starting to use the immediate safety planning template, as is Western Sydney, Nepean, Blue Mountains. You guys in the room? Yoo-hoo! So I know that we've had just the very beginnings of conversations about that. And so I just want to very quickly show you this template. The bottom part's going to look like very familiar to you. So it's particularly the top bit that I've added in that I just wanted to share with you and see if it might be useful. So the top part of this template is actually about the preparation we do as professionals. I love that you guys have packs, by the way. Can I just say that? When I first started working with Kath and Elle, they used to say, yeah, when we do a pack, and I kind of go, what's a pack? Hang on, tell me again, what's a pack? That's an absolutely fantastic place to be really slowing down and doing the critical thinking about where might danger be present for these children. What are we worried might happen in the immediate term? What's the serious harm that we're worried might happen? So the top part of this safety planning template looks at the work that we're asking professionals, the thinking that we're asking professionals to do before we go out and meet with a family, or on the phone as you are meeting with the family and have idea. Oh, I love that I still do phones like that. Of course, it should be like that, shouldn't it? But yeah, I still do that. As you are talking, for example, with your manager casework about what you are seeing, what you are hearing, seeing, understanding is present for the family in terms of danger. So the top part looks at worry statements. What are we worried might happen to this child if nothing changes? Just in terms of danger, not about long-term worries, not about risk, only about danger. It also looks at the goals at that point. What would we need to see? What would safety need to look like for this child for us to be confident that they weren't in danger? Not the steps toward safety, but actually safety itself. What would that look like? The next area it names up and asks everyone to think through are what we call non-negotiables. Have people heard that term? Immediate safety planning? Yeah, so it's looking at, because we want the safety plan, the bottom part of the safety plan, the action steps, to be developed by the family. We want the family to be able to think through and say, what can we do? What have we tried in the past? What could we do that we think is going to be able to protect our kids right now? And as professionals, you need to be really clear about what would be enough. So the non-negotiables is the place where, as professionals, we name up what is the minimum we would need to see in the plan. What are the actions, whatever the family, this particular family, is clear will work for them, what are the things that we have to see included so that we are all confident that these children will be safe enough tonight, tomorrow, for the next few days, for the next week. Those are the non-negotiables. The final part there in that top section is what we're calling what-if questions. And it's all of that contingency planning, all of the questions that run through our mind about, so what if the safe person that's there actually needs to leave? What if mum and dad have decided that the thing that's going to work best to protect their kids right now is for dad to stay with his brother? What if tonight dad says, seriously not doing that, and turns back up at the door? What if other aspects of the plan start to fall apart? Those what-if questions are the place where we get to think through, and then with the family, invite the family to think through all of the contingencies, all the kind of stuff that could go wrong that the plan needs to have actions to address. So it's a way of kind of that top bit of the immediate safety plan is the opportunity for you as professionals to do some thinking about, okay, let's think around just the kind of what is the danger, what are the parameters for that, so that we then are standing on that platform as we support the family to come up with the detailed actions. Is that making sense? Yeah? So we're going to work through this template in the workshop just to give you the opportunity to kind of try that top bit out and see how that lands for you. So I know that there are some regions in New South Wales that are starting to use the CAP framework, and for those people that were involved in the pilot, at that point it was the Family Safety Centre Practice Collaborative Assessment and Planning Framework. We got to Queensland and one of the groups there very quickly named it as the CAP framework. So it's a little, there's some difference in it, but I just really want to invite you guys to think through, just as you use a great tool in your case consultation and group supervision that's very similar to the CAP framework, using the information sharing and consultation framework. I want to invite you to think about using something similar to have the conversations you're having with families. Now, if you are already, my huge apologies, because I've then missed that in all of my trying to understand your context well. What I am seeing all around the world is a tool like the CAP framework that gives us a way of having direct conversations with families to invite them to think through all of the different aspects of our assessment and our planning together, grows the critical thinking of family members. It ensures that we have much better information as we are scoring SDM tools, as we are making the critical decisions. You want the family's voice to be present from day one. So everywhere I work, we use the CAP framework as the tool that just helps to scaffold those conversations. If that's something that you want to use, it's on my website. You have my full permission to take it, use it, change it, do what you need to do with it to make it work for you guys here. But I've certainly heard from folks in southwest Sydney and from Uniting Burnside, who I'm working with, that the CAP's fitting really well into your ongoing processes that you're using. So guys, I just wanted to make that as an offer in case it's useful.